she said a lot there, and I want to try to deal with some of the contradictions that she mentioned. She mentioned how many of our brothers are being turned into homosexuals in the prison industrial complex. As someone who works in the prisons, I totally agree with that position. But the contradiction is in the fact that she said that we are fighting against homosexuality, but she just admitted that many of our youth are being turned into this form of life through unhealthy and unnatural means. So if you admit that we have brothers and sisters who are being forced into this way of life, why would we not fight against it? So that was a contradiction. Another contradiction was she mentioned sisters who can't get pregnant. Just because a woman cannot bear a child doesn't mean she wants to have sex with other women. That's another contradiction. Most black women who are infertile are still heterosexual, so that was another contradiction. One of the confusing statements related to children not coming into the world with a sexual identity. I'm going to disagree with that. And I'm going to disagree with that because although children do not come into the world conscious of their sexual identity development, which is something that has been spiritually engineered by supreme consciousness, begins to unfold at the age of puberty. It's already there, but it begins to unfold. To say that a child doesn't come into the world with a sexual identity just because they're not conscious of it is like saying black people are not the original man and woman of the earth because we're not conscious of it, or to say that humanity is born into the world with a morsel of God consciousness in the center of their soul because they're not conscious of it. There's a lot that we as African people are not conscious of, and not being conscious of it does not negate the existence of that particular entity. The other thing also that we have to look at, I want to make it clear that being against homosexuality does not promote hatred for homosexuals. I am totally against that. That is an idea that is being pushed by the homosexual movement to make anyone who is against the behavior fearful of speaking out against it. I am not a hater of any African. I am a hater of the behaviors that they engage in. The sister mentioned pedophilia, and I would agree with her in stating that heterosexual pedophilia, a man molesting a pre-pubertal black girl is a bigger issue in the community than is homosexual pedophilia or homosexuality. For me, as a psychologist, in the cases that I see, and the statistics that I read, I would agree with the sister that we are not spending enough time talking about heterosexual forms of sexual perversion, the chief one being heterosexual perversion or molestation of black girls by black men, and also heterosexual rape, black men raping black women. I would agree that heterosexual forms of sexual deviance are not being covered enough. But I also want to state this. Homophobia is fear of a homosexual. I am not afraid of any homosexual, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. I would go into an auditorium filled with them and debate their best mind on the principle of whether or not they are born with that. In fact, I was challenged by a homosexual 2 years ago to come on his blog talk show, a all-homosexual show with nothing but homosexual listeners, to debate on his show whether or not I believed homosexuality was something that was normal. And at the end of the show, I had him question, someone who had never questioned whether or not he was born that way. At the end of the show, he was questioning whether or not he was born that way. So homophobia is fear of engaging the LGBT population on this issue. I have no fear of homosexuals. I do therapy with homosexual and lesbian teenagers on a regular basis. There's no fear for me. And the reason there's no fear for me is because I'm secure in my manhood as an African man. A true homophobe is somebody who is insecure about their identity. And because they are fearful of their own insecurity, they beat up on the LGBT community in a reactionary manner, not in a proactionary manner that we do, but a reactionary manner where they resort to name-calling and threatening physical violence and death. I'm not into that because I'm not a homophobe. And many homophobes actually were victimized as children, and their homophobia is a unconscious reaction to try to fight back against the experience they had, which triggered their insecurity. Umar Johnson is no such member of that group.